Hello, and welcome to Permission to Be Powerful with Michelle Marie. I am so excited to interview today Klara and Goldy. I did not put the Y on my paper. See, we're spontaneous here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah,
thank you for inviting me. I'm really a passion of mine.
It's so fun. Klara and I never have actually met, and a friend of ours suggested this interview series, and we sat down for a conversation. And just like many of the women that I've interviewed on here, we probably could have talked and can talk for hours about the subject that we're talking about today. So it was so exciting to have somebody from across the world show up in my porch here and be able to talk about the feminine and power and her own journey in exploring this subject, both with herself and the people that she wants to work with. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that you've invited me to talk into something that I am so passionate about and have been from a very young age, actually. And my own journey has been, as you put it earlier, it's a heroine's journey of exploring what it is to be feminine and to break the taboos of back when I was younger, particularly of those gender stereotypes in the world for women.
Yes.
So I'm just so thank you, because, I think this work is so important, and having women now of, who can make impact in the world and can be influence in the world is extremely valuable. And we need the balance. I'm a great believer in balance in the world, and we can see how the world has been so tipped out of balance. And the feminine, what the feminine brings is a very important work. And as women start to reclaim their own personal power, which is what my work is about. I'm Klara Goldy, interior designer, had a best-selling book on Amazon. But I am so passionate and committed to helping women. Even though I have my own business, I make time aside to support women in their own growth. And that's, work I keep quite low key, but it's very much there. And if you dig a little deeper in my website, or you get connected with me, you'll find it's there.
Well, speaking of your website, I'm going to read your bio real quick, and then and then we can launch into the conversation.
Okay.
So let me pull this up. So Klara Goldy is the CEO and founder of Klara Goldy Interiors and creator of the Divine Decorator. She is a full accredited design professional with SBID Master Intuitive, a published author, holds a BA honor degree, and is a professional speaker. And she's had clients' homes featured on UK TV and national magazines such as Homes and Antiques, Sunday Times Style magazine. Klara is passionate about supporting her audience and customers to see beyond their perceived limitations in their life and in their environments. Her audience and clients are able to easily move forward because of her step-by-step processes, so they can release outdated beliefs and patterns that do not support them, so they can quickly and effectively create a soul-aligned life, home, and/or business. Plus, with her proven techniques and energy work, her clients and audience easily feel a new level of ease, excitement, and renewed passion. Klara has a lifelong commitment to creating world-class services for her clients around the world. Whether she's speaking to a group of 20 or hundreds, Klara ignites the atmosphere with her insights, enthusiasm, and innovative techniques. And you can learn more at klaragoldy.com, KLARAGOLDY.com.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. So let's dive in. We were speaking earlier about how, this part of my mission is to amplify the voices of women. As you stated, our voices have been squashed for a very long time, and sometimes by our own doing. And it's time for us to step forward and to step forward boldly and really share from our hearts. You know, our personal stories are often a reflection or the beginning of the work that we are here to do in the world. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about not having like canned questions and really making this more of a conversation and exploring the journey that has brought you to where you are with your clients and in your life.
Yeah.
And I know you've had some,
journey.
I know.
People think, you know, there's a big push in the world at the moment about being awakened and enlightened, but sometimes it's the journey where those pieces get flagged up to us, and where we make those connections and those kind of aha moments, and then the next piece arrives, you know, and we have to do the work. For me, you know, you're asking me what does power mean, and it's very much about owning your own personal power. And it's not about what other people think, you know, it's not doing something for an effect, it's doing it so that you are in integrity and impeccability with your own source connection, or your soul alignment, or God, or however you want to call that. And I think women being very heart-centered, I'm not saying men aren't, but women are particularly heart-centered. And they feel this connection very deeply and can do. And I think this is why we need more women in business, in all walks of life, to really share how we can shape our world. We have amazing women showing up in the world, which is fabulous, but we need more women to actually influence and shape and share in their own, you know, with their friends, with their communities. And so that for me is the work that I help women do, is to really step into that authentic, aligned place and expand what that is and be able to voice it. I mean, I have a lot to say on this subject, so I'll let you ask me questions. But there is something I'd like to read at some point, if you've got time, that really expresses, you know, expresses that.
Well, it's interesting because one of, well, actually, why don't you read it now?
Oh,
Since
okay.
that's the call, that's the impulse, like, go for it.
Well, it is. I really got the impulse to share this because I think it's very succinct what personal power is. And actually, one of my favorite authors is a guy called Carlos Castanedas. I don't know if you've heard of him. This is an extract from his book, Tales of Power. And I think it sums up very quickly and easily what it is. I won't read the whole thing, but he says that Don Juan is the teacher here, and his student is Carlos Castanedas, who's the author. And they're talking about personal power. And Carlos Castanedas says, well, what if I never have it? And he says, well, if you never have it, we'll never have this conversation, we'll never talk. And the guy says, at that rate, I will never have enough of it. And he says, that's up to you, he replied. I've given you all the information necessary. Now it's your responsibility to, it's your responsibility to gain enough personal power to tip the scales. And now the guy says, well, you're talking in metaphors. I said, give it to me straight. Tell me exactly what I should do. If you've already told me, let's say I've forgotten it. Don Juan chuckled and lay down, putting his arms behind his head. You know exactly what you need, he said. I told him that sometimes I thought I knew, but that most of the time I had no self-confidence. I'm afraid that you're confusing issues, he said. The self-confidence of the warrior is not the self-confidence of the average man. The average man seeks certainty in the eyes of the onlooker and calls that self-confidence. The warrior seeks impeccability in his own eyes and calls that humbleness. The average man is hooked to his fellow man, while the warrior is hooked only to himself. Perhaps you're chasing rainbows. You're after the self-confidence of the average man when you should be after the humbleness of the warrior. The difference between the two is remarkable. Self-confidence entails knowing something for sure, whereas humbleness entails being impeccable with one's actions and feelings. And you'll find with what I talk about through my work, I talk about owning your own self personal power is different between, and this is where I came from, this is where my journey started when I was a young girl. And you know, it felt to me at the time that the balance was tipped towards male. You know, males were going to go on and do these brilliant things. Women were going to have babies and children. They were going to be these little housewives or secretaries. And you know, I used to think, well, hang on a minute, that's not what I'm designed for. I'm designed for something else.
Yeah.
I might go and have a family. I might go and have children. And so I was always exploring, and Don Juan in his book goes on to talk about pushing yourself and being impeccable with yourself and pushing yourself beyond and knowing what you're feeling. And I think that's the real big key to, people say sometimes you're so lucky, you're da-da-da-da-da-da, or you've done this. And I'm like, no, I've pushed myself constantly out of my comfort zones. You know, in very difficult situations when things look stacked against me, I pushed myself outside of those comfort zones.
It's interesting because the image that's coming to me right now as you're talking is like giving birth to ourselves, right? Like we have to push to give birth to ourselves. And when we think of push in business, we often think of kind of that masculine energy, right? Of like the domination or the, you know, power over. But the way that you're describing it is a very kind of feminine push. Like it's really like digging in and like what needs to come out, like what needs to be pushed through. And I love that. I love that reframe.
So when you like, when I work, I know I was looking at your questions earlier, when I work I work with teams, you know, men, women, all sorts. But when we birth a project, it's not about me. I'm not some hierarchical business.
Right.
The business gets born and the project gets born because it's a culmination of the teams that I work with. And the one thing that I love and that comes through about personal power is that in the world, we've been taught about knowledge and being academic and more knowledge and more knowledge. And I think sometimes when youngsters, you know, you see it with all the exam results, they've got to get all these exam results, and and there's a fear that they're not going to be enough, or they're not going to be good enough, and they're not going to know enough. And I want to say to people, just breathe that out, because we all come in with these incredible soul gifts. And for me, personal power is about expanding what your personal gift and joy is, that you can be of service and of value in the world. So it's success. People sometimes measure success by money,
right?
But I measure success by the value that I bring to my clients. And yeah, of course, I get paid for doing that work. You know, there's a value that goes with that. But it's not about
it's service. It's showing up fully as ourselves in service to the other, right? And when we are in service to others, there is a reciprocity. And in our current culture, that's money, you know, or opportunity, or, you know, time or whatever. And I think a lot of women get stuck there, you know, where it's like, oh, but that's icky, or that's, you know, the money stuff comes up, the money mindset stuff comes up around our worth and just all of this stuff.
And I want to share another thing, that it isn't about money. When I've done my best work is come from a place sometimes in my journey, and I share in my story, is I've had to start over with nothing. And so people think, oh, you know, when I've got this, or when I've got that, when I have enough money, when I have enough, it's not about that. It's how you show up. Your personal power is how you show up with your impeccability and who you are and what you can do for your clients. And they recognize that. They hear that. So it's not about, you know, money. It's about the energy of who we are and what we bring with who we are and what we're doing for our customers. So that's really important, because a lot of people get stuck in, oh, I need this, or I need that, and then I can do this, and then I can do that. And that's not true. So when you're owning your personal power, you're owning the fact that you can go and make a difference to someone's life.
So tell me a little bit about how you came to these conclusions, you know, because I know that often these lessons land, you know, because they're a part of our own journey and our own exploration. That's why it's so important to share with others. We want to help others have it a little easier on that journey, or be able to skip that pitfall, or, you know, whatever it might be. So based on your own life, how did you come to these ideas that being connected to source is an aspect of our power, and that owning our own integrity is a piece of our power? And how did you come to some of those?
Wow, that's quite a deep question.
It is.
There have been, like, I can name in my life, there have been different stages of that recognition. I would say that from a very early age, I naturally had that connection, very strong. I didn't recognize what it was because we're not taught that in the world.
Right, exactly. We think we're crazy because
so,
nobody's...
Nobody's told us. They teach about God, there's something outside of ourselves, blah, 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 you know. But this thing was very strong. I can remember, for example, in the playground when I was, particularly when I was a teenager, I could literally go into, you know, like be sitting in the playground with the nature, and the kids would all be playing, and I would literally zone into a deeply meditative state, and the playground would disappear, and I would be in this completely beautiful space, you know. And that wasn't now and again, that was regularly. So that was kind of playing out in my life. I had that natural ability, and I think actually all kids to a degree have variations of that ability to do that. So I think what happened was, like, I had this very deep connection, but the world outside of me was not computing back in kind of like who I knew I was. And I ended up, you know, being quite shut down and dumbed down and all the rest of it. And I think because I have a very strong kind of energy, I got to my teens, it was my early 20s and into my mid 20s, and I had shocking panic attacks. I mean, they were off the scale, very acute panic attacks. And at the time, they were completely I can't get the word out. Debilitating.
Right?
Debilitating. They were completely debilitating. And that put me on a very steep journey, spiritual journey, because at the time, mainstream medicine, although I was grateful to it to, you know, like, in the immediacy helped me, but it didn't help me understand why this was happening to me. And that's where the soul work came in very deeply, because I started to see that I was trying to operate to what I thought the world expected of me as a female, you know, as a woman, the expectations, but it wasn't matching what I was feeling in my inner world. And I hadn't made that link at that time between the inner and the outer. My work is very much about from the inside out, you know, really understanding ourselves breath by breath, who we are. And so that outer world wasn't matching my inner world.
And what messages were you getting about yourself?
You know, men are more intelligent, you know, they're more academic, they're being trained. And I didn't feel I was an academic at the time. I didn't feel that was my natural ability. I now I know later on that I'm highly empathic, I'm a seer, and I'm a, you know, I'm a spiritual or energy healer, whichever way you want to say it. And of course, the world that we were in was very linear about learning and, you know, building up people for workforces and all those kinds of things. And I was not fitting into any of those pieces, you know, I really wasn't. And so I had this kind of meltdown. I couldn't see where I fitted in these panics about, like, who am I? I don't fit in any of the packages of what it is to be woman.
And what I love about what you're describing and the end result that we know that you've come to is that I believe our greatest superpowers, like our
Yeah.
originality and uniqueness as individuals, business owners, etc.,
Yeah.
is in everything that we were told was a weakness.
Yeah.
That is the gold in
Yes.
our stories, that
Totally.
is like the beacon, like
Yeah.
Batman's beacon to,
Yeah.
you know, in the sky, to the
Absolutely.
people who
Yeah.
are going to resonate with us, who are going to fit with us,
Yeah.
who we're going to connect most deeply to,
Yeah.
right? It's
Exactly.
just,
And it was
it's so
like,
fascinating.
it is, because then, you know, there was a part of me, I was so determined and so courageous. I'm like, hell, I'm not doing it the way that they're telling me it can be done. I knew I wanted to be an interior designer. You know, I knew that's what I want. I was creative. I was passionate about people. I noticed things when I was a kid. Like, I noticed how color and environments impacted on people. I was very aware, hugely aware as a child about this kind of thing. And I've written about that in my book, you know, talked into that a little bit. So I was like, hell no, I'm not following that. And so I had, one thing I had was a lot of courage. It's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to find a way of doing this. And that's what the impetus was in my journey. And, you know, I feel like at times, you know, people look at me and think, oh, she's got everything, you know, she's this, she's that, she's doing blah, blah, blah. But I want to say to anybody who's feminine, or anybody who's an entrepreneur who's thinking about it, you haven't got to have it all worked out.
Exactly.
You have not got to. And I remember people telling me things like, oh, you know, you're in a man's world, it's never going to work, it's this, it's that, blah, blah. Do you know, that's my best asset now that I'm a female. And actually, because of my skill set, the guys really respect me, because I do in the business the pieces that they can't do or haven't got time to do. I manage the client, so I make it a very seamless flow, and I'm bringing a lot of the feminine energy in, which clients love, and actually so do the task force. You know, they actually like that, you know, whether they had actually admitted or but they like that aspect. And so I've learned in my own journey to find a very unique path, that I'm doing things now, you know, that is kind of set a precedence in my business. But I had to start somewhere, and it was in a very small, very kind of humble, oh my god, I'm fumbling my way through. And even now, you know, I've up leveled, but I'm still, there's a new journey to be made. And that's the exciting thing, you know, everything we do is for the first time. We just can't possibly know what's coming next. What we learn is how to claim our personal power. And that's what I teach in my Diamond Lotus work. You know, I really help women who are very talented, or they're up leveling, or they're going through major shifts, because I can see where their blocks are, where they've blocked themselves, or where they've edited themselves, or they've put themselves into a little small, and they don't see who they are, the big shiny version of who they are. And
I like
my joy is to get them to expand out into that bigger, shinier, passionate, alive sense of who they really are.
So tell me about something that that led you to that realization that this is, you know, because you talked earlier about, like, we're taught that, you know, God is outside of us, and part of what you're talking about is recognizing that divinity within, right? And letting that lead us forward, and having the courage to break the mold and break outside of the boxes of what we've been told we are supposed to do, or we can do, or whatever. So do you have any moments in your history, and I know sometimes it's not like a big moment, it's more like a slow rolling, you know, snowball that's getting bigger and bigger, until all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait a second, I'm not doing that anymore, or I'm doing this now, you know? So I recognize it's not always like this, oh, you know, kind of moment that we have.
There have been many, many, many moments I can think along my journey. I think one of them was, how can I say, there's been realizations around asking your worth, recognizing that, you know, that we can ask our worth. I think women tend to think they have to work these long, hard hours and it doesn't have to be like that either. You know, we forget that actually sometimes what we're bringing is of great value to our clients, and actually that piece is what they need or what they want.
Right.
You know, and we really have to own that. There are times, like big pieces for me is, how can I say this? I think I kind of wrote a little bit of a snapshot of it down. And it's like, one of the things you discover when you start stepping into your power, and it's not like, hey, I'm a big powerful, it's not that kind of power that I'm talking about. It's just your, I guess it's your self-awareness and your radar. I think for me, power is about accessing how you're feeling. And so often, and this is my kind of gem work that I work with, it's people have numb out, or they don't go into their feelings. Their feelings are ugly. And the emotions that come out of that space of not owning our feelings, like the emotions, the outer facing, they're the things that show or just explode out, you know, whether that's feeling depressed or feeling angry or feeling jealous, or, you know, all these different emotions we have. They're actually a guidance system. And the work that I really, my really deep work is getting people to go underneath that. And very often they don't even know they're doing it. It's like a play out that they're playing out on the outside. And when you actually get people to start claiming their personal power, and they have to start looking at the feelings that are getting triggered by certain situations, then they start to realize that some of the stuff on the outside is actually an illusion. It's not real. It's like, I mean, Einstein said it, you know, when you're looking at the lion in nature, you're just seeing the tail, and then there's this whole lion, and that's a bit like life. You know, you're seeing a piece of something, but you don't know what the whole shape of it is. And, you know, it's really trusting in that, going forward with that and your own ability with something. Like, you know, the things you can do well. Like when I show up with a client now in a job, I mean, I've just completely knocked someone's house around, you know, we've gutted it, you know, the ceilings are out, the floors are up, you know, and the thing is, when you first start looking at the job, you know, you don't know how much you're going to do or how much, so you just go with the flow, and then suddenly that thing expands because the customers get excited, they want to do this and this, and suddenly you're there. And it's like, if I thought about doing all of that to begin with, I might have gone, oh my God, I can't do all of that, because I mean, I'm exaggerating.
Right, you would have started in a box rather than allowing the box to start to form around what's actually present.
So I think very often in our lives we can get overwhelmed by thinking. The thinking mind can get in the way of people because they start blowing it up, thinking this and thinking that, and suddenly it's become something it isn't even, because you don't even know what it is. You're just seeing a piece of it. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. The way that I, you know, often talk about that is, you know, that vulnerability is our superpower, and vulnerability is a combination of being able to be fully present with what is, including our feelings, right? What's actually moving through me right now in this moment. And it's also recognizing that when we take the risk to share something like that's vulnerable, as far as like it's private information or it's sensitive information or it's a story we haven't shared before or whatever, that we have this myth in our heads that vulnerability somehow means that we have a target on our back, that if I'm vulnerable, this is something you can attack me with or use against me or harm me with. And the reality is that if you aren't in judgment of your experience, if you aren't in judgment of your feelings and your thoughts and your process and your mistakes and all of these things, it cannot be used as a weapon against you. It cannot, right? Because you've completely owned it.
Totally. Like I remember, you know, the first time I spoke, I mean, that was overcoming a really massive vulnerability. You know, it was going back quite a few years ago. It was in my 30s when I first spoke up on stage and had to you know, it was like, Klara, you'll do that. And it's like, why will I do that? You know, I'm really vulnerable about speaking and da 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 da. But I got a lot of support from my colleagues, you know, at the time. And I said, you know, this is, so I do think when you are vulnerable, it does allow others to open up to you. And then that creates this amazing, I don't know, it's like a synergy opens up when you allow that.
Well, it creates connection. It creates connection and a heart opening.
Yeah. And, you know, especially, you know, in business, when you're coming together, I always remember when I first went on a project and some guy wanted some steel staircase. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never done that before. And, you know, he laughed and he said, you know, everything you come with, it's for the first time, even when you're a pro.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're still coming with like a whole bunch of circumstances, but what you show up with is your personal power.
Yes.
To know that you can be responsible and shift and shape this, and you're working with different people and you're working through that. Is it possible? It may not be possible, but you know, you're at least having a look at how it can be done, you know. So a lot of people get scared and don't do things because they worry about what other people think and they worry about the judgments. And I think if you just like, I mean, we all have it to a degree. I have it too, you know, and I've been learning to release those judgments on myself. You know, so if I don't get it right or it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. I think as women, I think a lot of the problem with women having is they want it to be the best. They want it to be perfect for, you know, the people around them. They want it to land just right. And how we can be overly perfectionist as women. And I think once we start to let go of that and trust in our own gifts that we're bringing through, and you know, you're not for everybody, but the people who get you and like you, you know, they're like, God, I love what you're doing and you really helped me and da 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 da.
Yeah. And it's funny because, you know, I don't learn from perfect people.
No,
I don't want to learn from perfect people. That's an unattainable goal in my mind, right? I want to learn from somebody who is real, somebody who is in touch, somebody who is able to name their you know, their shadow and their insecurities and all of that.
It's important to be able to do that, because you know, then you're allowing the energy to move in that particular space that actually we're working towards something, and this is the outcome we'd like, but how can we, you know, how can we get there? You know, and I think that's really key for people. Sometimes they think they have to have it all mapped out, they have to understand it all, and it's not like that. You just sometimes have to, you come with your skill set, you know, like you have your skill set and you come and you show up with that. And that's personal power for me. That's having the courage to go, do you know what, I'm going to show up anyway. I may not be able to do this project. It may not be for me. I may feel that I have to farm that out, but I still show up.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the thing.
Yeah, the showing up is everything, because I like to call them cracking open moments. And the biggest like leaps in my own evolution that I've made are those moments when I came up against one of those fears or imposter syndrome overwhelmed me, or perfectionism overwhelmed me, and I'm in the middle and I'm spinning and I'm in my head and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and nothing is happening, nothing is moving, and I have that like, you know, moment of like just cracking open, like being in tears and just like and breathing and just shifting it and like literally moving it through my body, and then coming out the other side like, oh, thank God, goddess, whoever you believe in, that I allowed myself to feel so that I could recognize this as a moment in my own evolution.
Absolutely.
That I get to really understand myself in this moment and recognize.
It's so important. I have had so many moments where I had to really learn to process the emotion behind something. And I think that's what I learned through my panic attacks, was before I had numbed out, not having, and then I went on this deeply spiritual journey, and I always remember, almost being breathed through and realizing this bigger part of me, and that I was all of that, and I couldn't fit myself into this little space to please or be what other people wanted me to be. It's like, no, and I had to really start owning how I felt at that moment, and those feelings that came up, and I still process deeply now in my work. I help other people process, and we go through.
Feelings are, emotion is energy in motion. They are meant to move. They're meant to be temporary. They're meant to be felt and experienced. And everything that we do in our society is designed to numb us out, or we tell people, oh no, calm down, it's okay, rather than
or
just
you're
like
too much, or you should be like this. Even like men, I've had 2 sons, and one thing I learned about men, which they don't tell you about guys, is they're they are these incredibly sensitive human beings as well. And they're not these kind of, oh, I've got to be so tough and macho. In fact, I'm not interested in that kind of stereotype. I like that guys can open up and be in tune. And I've taught my sons that their feelings are incredibly important to help them navigate life. If you go into a situation and your intuition tells you you don't want to work with somebody, you trust that intuition. You understand
the power of so owning our power as women and as mothers allows us to transfer our knowledge and wisdom onto our children, especially our male children, around the importance of the feminine in them. And then they become amazing men. Like my youngest son is just, he blows my mind at times because he's just so in tune, and he's a really good boyfriend, and he really he just, and he processes his feelings, and he talks about things, and he just it's quite amazing to watch him move through the world, and knowing that I had a part in that, like knowing that our conversations are going to ripple out into the rest of the world, and it's going to affect his partners, it's going to affect his kids and his coworkers, and we forget sometimes that we have that level of power in our own intimate relationships.
Exactly,
really,
and that's what I'm keen to share about, because I feel we're like a stone that gets thrown in the pond, and we have to make ripples. Some people think it's doing all the big out there kind of work, and it's not necessarily. It's sometimes doing the ripples in our community, and then you share that with, and they go, oh yeah, you share it with someone, and they, oh yeah, and then it starts allowing something else. And for me, it's the allowing. It's not like we're straitjacketed. I see a lot of, I have to be very politically correct, but I think the world is shifting away from the old paradigms, of what it is. I mean, yes, women do certain things. Yes, men do certain things. Women do some things brilliantly. Men do some. This isn't about feminine, by talking about women having impact and influence. It's not about women domination.
Taking over.
It's just about women. As a young woman, I was, here's a little example,
we lost your sound. So hold on. Yeah. We lost your sound a little bit.
Am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit hot today, actually. So as a young woman, I had a very strong body. I was very fast at running. There was about 5 of us, boys and girls together, and so I never thought of myself as different, or yes, we were different. We knew we were different. But what I'm saying is our physicalities at that age, were the same. Right. So I grew up with this idea that, as a female, I had a strong body. I was designed to move, and to me, that's really important, is being able to be breathed through, to move, to have your body. It's not like little girls have to sit in this nice kind of, which was a lot of the information coming through, kind of straitjackets women. And I see that in different cultures as well. And I'm not going to name any cultures, but that inhibit women to such a degree that they've lost that ability to be expressive and to to allow these emotions to, and they actually, what they don't realize is that's actually damaging to the masculine, because the masculine is then missing a really integral, important piece within themselves, you know, because we're made up of both. And
like you said, I think something that you're speaking to is, again, we're not trying to take over, and we're not saying there's anything wrong with the masculine at all.
I love the masculine.
What we're saying is, like, so you've had your run, right? Of like us being on one end of the spectrum, and it's time for us to come into our power, and not to bring it to the other side of the spectrum, but to
help, this amazing weed.
Exactly, to remind us that we all have both.
Yeah, all have both. And that is so healthy.
Everything in between, that it's not even that kind of binary where it's either this or it's that. It's the range, and the more comfortable we can all get with recognizing that we all have this range, and we all get to choose and decide which side we're going to feel into today, or in this moment, or whatever it is. Then it's like we get to break these paradigms.
Totally. I mean, I've been a paradigm breaker in my own way from a very young age. I was very conscious of it. I'm not playing into the idea of what it is to be a woman. I know what it is I understand my feminine essence.
Right.
I completely understand, and I'm embracing it, and I'm still learning. Yeah. I'm still learning what that is, you know.
Thank goodness.
I'm still correcting myself. I'm not saying, oh, I've stopped being, you know, blah, blah, blah now. And I'm still, because sometimes I get it wrong. You know, we all do. We make mistakes. We think, whoops, no, I'm not that. But we have that ability to stretch into experimenting with, how do I need to show up? You know, what does feel good for me? Who am I? But to have someone tell you what you should be, it's not my idea of being a human. You know, we're not robotic things. We have these we come in, each and every one of us with an incredible gift to serve our community or our families, and who knows who's going to do what, you know. And we have to allow that expansion for both, for masculine and feminine, and come into for me it's about integrating and bringing the heart center of the feminine into the masculine even more. But it is there. I mean, there's incredibly heart-centered men in the world, but we would like more of them, and to soften down into that. It's not giving their power away.
Exactly.
It's not disempowering them in any way, shape, or form. And you know, for me, they can then understand the softness, the soft power of the feminine, shall we say?
Well, and the soft power of the masculine. It's documented all over the place that is one of the core qualities of men is a really finely attuned sensitivity, because you can't, how can you be responsible if you aren't sensitive to what you are being responsible to, or you know. And I think you know, when we err on the side of like the toxic masculinity, it's just like anything, you know, it's the shadow of the masculine, the kind of disowned, you know, icky qualities of the masculine, and we as women have our own icky qualities of the feminine. And it's just about recognizing that, like being able, like you said, to just feel back in, like, how does this feel? And when I'm around a man who is in touch with his heart, you know, I'm not like, oh, look at him, he's so sensitive, you know. I feel good. And when I'm around a man who's like, you will do what I tell you to do, I don't feel good. And I rely on that. Like, I think it was Roosevelt who had, no one cares what you say until they know that you care. And there are so many men who fall into that trap of that kind of the intensity of that toxic masculinity. And the men whose kids listen and really respect them are the ones who know how to do the softness, right? Who know how to drop into their hearts and go, okay, buddy, come on, let's look at this. That's not working, you know. And it's not that there isn't a consequence, or there isn't, you know, but there's that juxtaposition of the softness and the structure. And it's such an inviting thing. And And those are, I think, the kinds of things that you and I are talking about, again,
Yeah.
about not like placing anybody in any particular box. It's more like, you know, how do we recognize that all of us have disowned these feminine qualities or these heart-based qualities, and how can we come back to them and just start leading from there, like leading from how does this feel, you know, and even our kids, like in the moment they might not like something that we say, but when they really sit with it, what they feel is safe.
I used to
Right?
say to my children, you know, it's very much about tuning in and feeling in, and just where are you in there, and it's kind of like just blowing that out and coming in. You know, it's like the breath. Everything starts with the breath, and when we recognize that we breathe in and we allow ourselves to drop into our heart center. I do a lot of work, chakra energy work with my clients, and you know, it's allowing that expansion. The minute we connect with a feeling, and sometimes the feelings can be incredibly uncomfortable, and sometimes the other thing that can happen, and this is the work that I teach and share, is that we have to get very clever at stalking things within ourselves, because sometimes it doesn't want, you know, a sabotaging or shadow part of us may not want to be vulnerable, may not want to open up because it feels too painful, and we put a lid on it because we think that's going, and actually, you know, that pain that's underneath that's where the gold sits.
Exactly.
And that's
and
my
they
work.
just keep knocking on our door because they need it to be
They
expressed.
will keep knocking on the door, and
right?
they will keep showing up the same situations, different people, but
Mhm.
the same kind of situations, until we get it, you know.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's what Carlos Castaneda's was talking about, you know,
Yeah.
in personal power, and really owning that, because vulnerability is a scary place, you know, and the world has taught us it's not okay to be vulnerable. We've got to be strong, you know, and that's not what I'm about. That's what set me off on the panic attacks, because I was this caring, soft, kind, and I was finding that difficult to be this, and yet I wanted to own my feminine power. But what was feminine power? Because there was no real, for me at the time, there wasn't any kind of you know, there wasn't a heroine around as such, and
Right.
now we've got lots of amazing, I teach in my own work, there's a course that I do in my work where I teach or take people into their heroines and their archetypes, and what those look like and feel like, and how can they own them. And it might just be literally in that moment to expand into that, just to feel that energy. It doesn't mean to say you've got to play out being Mary Magdalena, or play out being,
but
you know, Isis, or
a form of embodied rehearsal, right? If I can just stop and use my imagination to tap into the energy of a particular archetype in my body, I have just locked it in. I can pull that out anytime that I want to.
Yeah.
I can remember what it felt like to stand in a position of like feeling that archetype or that power or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And really allow myself to go there, like allow myself to really just to come back into the body. I don't have to intellectually understand it. That's what I love about it. It's like embodiment work is so important, because we don't have to get it. We just have to let ourselves feel it. And then remember that we can access it anytime that we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. You know, in the world, we've made the, you know, really we've made the sort of knowledge is amazing. You know, knowledge teaches lots of things, and we need knowledge because, you know, we know, but the other side of that is trusting in our personal intuition, that power that we have within. Right. And that's a very fine tool that we have to keep practicing and refining and working with it. And what people can find when they do embodiment work is that they can't embody themselves in totality. And that's the work that I'm sharing in what I'm doing. And it's where are those blocks sitting in you? And sometimes, you know, joining with a coach or working with a group of women can help, or men, if you're a man, you know, can help blast you through those things.
Yes.
However, sometimes it's much more deep rooted. And that's where my work comes in, with bringing in the feminine and being I'm very still with people. And we drop into I take people and guide them into a very still point. And sometimes they've never been there in their lives.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, oh, wow. I mean, I've been there myself, where I'm still entering into territory within myself. It's like, why am I feeling fear in this moment about doing this? And one has to ask yourself, where is that fear coming from? Is this a rational fear, or is this, you know? And so I'm working on that level with people. And sometimes it comes from ancestral, you know, ancestral pattern that's been passed. You know, the shamans talk about 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And as women, you know, we're carrying these babies in our bellies, and you know that these babies are picking up all our coding, you know, on all kinds of levels. So you know, sometimes the stories get lost along the way. You know, like I can go back into one particular part of my family history where they lost everything. They lost their home, and they had to flee the country. This was the potato famine in Ireland.
Yes. My family too.
Yeah, I remember when we talked about that. So there's this kind of, you know, there must have been this kind of feeling that they had. And my great-grandmother was pregnant at the time. She didn't know it when she got on the boat. So she passed that knowledge, good, bad, or indifferent, or whatever you want to say. But those feelings that she was feeling would have been felt through that baby. You know?
Exactly.
That was my grandmother, so my great-grandma and my grandmother, and so on and so forth. So these entrainments can get passed down, and so sometimes we have to go back to those deeper places to release.
Yes.
It's not always, what I'm saying is, it's not always in this lifetime that so
Absolutely.
these feelings, this is why feelings are really important, to grab hold of them, and they can be slippery things.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about this conversation, you know, is one of the things that I don't think we talk about enough as women is this idea that, you know, really, ladies, gentlemen, we cannot avoid the work any longer. All of us, we have to do the deeper work to expand, to help us move from these insane, you know, polar opposite views and play in this messy middle ground and really learn how to be with those intense feelings and stay grounded in our bodies when we're having these conversations. And it's just vital for all of us. Like and here's the thing that, you know, I think you and I both share is, like, when we talk about deep work, it's not always hard.
Not always. Sometimes,
you know, sometimes it's hard, but hard in the sense that it causes us to have to be with our feelings, right? That but it's not always hard. Sometimes it is these kind of almost like we get to be jokers and laugh with ourselves and really like just be kind of you know, aware that like we're taking ourselves way too freaking seriously, and it's time to just like let it go, you know. And
exactly, that's the best word. I when I put, you know, run groups, it's about, for me, it's about the juicy celebration, and sometimes in those moments can come up some of our vulnerabilities, like when we look at it from that perspective. And then when there's a shared ground between people, it's like, oh my God, you've been feeling like that too. And I think that the problem has been in the masculine world is this stiff upper lip, we're on our own, we're doing it on our own. Whereas, you know, when I was younger and I had intense feelings about things, and then it wasn't until I talked to a friend of mine a little bit older, and she said, oh my God, I've had exactly the same thing happen to me. It was like, oh, the relief.
We can breathe.
Relief. You know, and so for me, when I work with people, it's a very spontaneous, can be a very spontaneous light thing that I do. And because I can see it into people, I literally see, it's like, oh my God, they're releasing it. And there was no effort. And sometimes there's more effort, depends. But if you've got the toolkit to kind of navigate these moments, I mean, my life has been messy. My life has not been this, people look at me and think, oh, she's had this and that, and da 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 da. But, you know, I've had a family, I've done it on my own. I have been a single mom. I had to start over again, you know. Who'd have thought that I would have created this business out of starting from nothing, you know, minus ground zero. But, you know, it's that part of us that connects to our personal power, and along the way it was very messy. I was like, oh my God, can I do this, you know?
Well, and there's the other piece that you're speaking to that I think is important is you know, when you talked about like the stiff upper lip and we have to do it on our own and that ultra independence, one of the beautiful things about circles of women or just being witnessed is that is a different layer of work. I can do my own process and be on my knees and do some really amazing work with myself. And there is a whole different level of work that happens when you have at least one other individual that is witnessing you in that cracked open moment where you have that realization, or they see into your soul. Because like you said, even if you're not quote unquote a seer, we do see those moments with each other where it's like, oh honey, you just did it, like you just broke through, I can feel it, you know. And it's so beautiful to witness each other in that, and to have watch the ripple breakthroughs of like multiple people having aha moments because one person allowed themselves to really be vulnerable and go through that process in front of others. It's just
so amazing. And for me, that's such a joy to see people. I mean, when I work with people particularly on a one-to-one, I get them to break through quite quickly, and it's like, it's just looking back at, they don't realize what they're saying, and it's like, have you da, 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 and they're like, oh my God. And I know that's happened to me sometimes, people, when we've been in groups, and it is that shared being in a very sacred space that you're allowing, you know, there's kind of like a permission, there's a permission to go into that space of vulnerability and softness, and what, you know, what is coming through, what is it that we're frightened of, what is the fears that we have collectively as well, because we have fears, you know, very much on an individual level. You know, even at the moment, you have to just really feel into people going through, you know, with the COVID is crashing so many businesses and economies at the moment. And I just want to say to those people that you'll be fine. And actually, sometimes what we get asked, in fact, I wrote this piece, and I feel really strongly about it.
How long is it? Because we are at the end of our time.
I was just about to say, you know, when you're under pressure and feeling crushed in dark spaces, you know, sometimes that feels, you know, on the opposite side can feel very difficult and horrible. But actually, when you break through it, it's like, it's just so amazing. And sometimes it's, what I'm trying to say is, it's pulling us into this greater part of who we really are, not what we think we should be or ought to be because this is how society has labeled it. And sometimes daring, you know, it is a big thing to act. That is such a big piece, is sometimes just to dare yourself to do these things, and that, you know,
and
people
honor yourself for taking that risk, right? To really, we don't have a lot of practices. In fact, women more so than men struggle with like this idea of like bragging, right? Of sharing the breakthroughs that they've had, or the accomplishments that they've made, or that the strengths that they have. It's like we've been trained to, oh no, don't talk about that. That's bragging. That's egotistical. That's whatever. And I think we need more models of women who are doing it in that very embodied, grounded way, right? Of just like, like everything we're talking about today, permission to be powerful, is the interview series, right? And to me,
Yeah.
what that means is permission to be vulnerable, because
Yeah.
I believe that is where our power lies.
Totally.
And that's everything that we've explored today, just reinforces that piece,
That's the
that
thing.
we are powerful beyond measure,
Oh,
as when we
I'm
can
getting
connect,
goosebumps,
right?
you know, getting goosebumps all over my body. I have so many stories I can tell you about
I know.
vulnerability, showing up and getting it wrong. And,
Yeah.
you know, when you start out in business, and the thing is, you know, we're all learning, and
Yeah.
it's just, it's allowing, there's a balance with, you know, with it, but it is giving yourself permission to learn and to grow, and and not get it right all the time.
Exactly.
Can't get it right. We'd be like
You have permission to fuck it up, people, just so you know. You have total permission.
In fact, sometimes if you don't fuck it up, you don't learn.
Exactly.
How can you learn? As long as you don't do big fuck ups, but you know, like the little ones along the way, like, oops, yeah.
I think my audience will be very proud of me that it took the entire interview before I said the word fuck. And
Well, I just wonder if I could say any naughty words.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Keep it clean today. Well, I've loved talking to you, and I do hope you'll invite me again. I'll dig some stories out, some juicy stories of my
I would love to
learning
talk
to be
again.
more vulnerable in my business growth, you know, and the things I did, and I'm like, and I look back and I think, God, wow, you know, did I really do that from that?
I know. I love those moments. I love those moments. Well, thank you so much, Klara. I so appreciate you being here. I love this conversation. I love your energy. I know that we will definitely talk again.
Well, I'm really passionate about, you know, men and women coming into this new vibration that we're entering into. And I think we're, you know, if we can keep our, how can I say, we can keep that balance within and connect to our hearts through these periods, I think we'll be doing a very amazing thing, actually, as we evolve out of this. And I'm excited that new possibilities are coming, because people having to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Vulnerability and is a great leveler, you know, it really flattens things out.
It's true. It's very true. Very true. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you, audience. I've been looking at you on that screen, so it looks like I've probably been looking in a different direction. I haven't been looking at me.